Hello, welcome to my talk about surviving in legacy code, unit test, ABAP test themes, and how to have a picture of the dependencies of the coding in mind. To activate. A main word is legacy code. Legacy code is normally old code you buy from someone else. But it's also a word that's now used by people who are interested in rescuing problematic code and making code working again, in transforming code into maintainable coding. So it's a good word to search also on Git, on Google for the topics I'm talking now. One definition of legacy code is by Michael Feathers, who wrote the famous books Working Effectively with Legacy Code. He defines legacy code as code without tests. And so legacy code can also be new code. Another definition by Andrea Goulet, one of the founders of Corribyte, a company that works with improving JavaScript applications, legacy code applications. She defines legacy code as code without proper communication. And we can also say legacy code is code with too many code smiles. So many code smiles that the complexity is so high that the cognitive stress becomes too big for me as a developer to do my duty, to perform my task well. Code smile is something that makes work difficult. Okay, you know, many points. I will mention two very fast. One is the fail fast principle. You should be aware how much time does it take to find out that there is an error, and how much time do you need to fix an error. So not enough loggings, not enough error handling can be a big smell. And the other point is not knowing at all what is required. So other requirements engineering may be missed and can be a big smell. What is a smell depends on the project, the developer, and the usage of the coding. So if I want to improve an application, I have to find out what's really a problem. What kind of smell hurts me in this concrete situation? And this may depend from customer, from time, and depend on many circumstances. So one rule I find very important is we should not apply design rules that add complexity without sufficient benefit. For instance, this is my medicine. I took this morning. You should not do this because you do not have the problem with high blood pressure as I have. And in medicine, it's normal for us, but not in IT, I have sometimes the feeling. Okay, what can we do to have a good program? One idea is to have clean coding. The famous book from Robert C. Martin about clean code. And the other one is write automatic tests. Here we have a component, a unit test. Before we test the rocket, we test smaller pieces of this. I prefer to have a combination of both clean code and automatic tests. And then it depends, again, it's a decision of the developer, what do you need to do. Okay, why do we make unit tests? Normally we say test means we test for correctness, but there are many more reasons why you make a unit test. One is to understand if I have a coding I do not know and I write a unit test for it, I will learn how the coding works. It's experimenting. When I did finish the unit test, I've characterized this method. If the method later on changes behavior, I will find it out because the unit test will break. And the unit test helps me to documentate the behavior. If you have a written document, the method doesn't care what you write down in the document. But if you have the documentation in a test and the method behaves differently, the test will fail. So unit test is a good way to documentate parts or pieces of the coding. But to know whether an application is correct, you need an integration test. You can use the technique of unit tests also to make integration tests. Okay, why do we do unit tests if only integration tests help us to find out what is correct? The point is it's easier to fix, much easier to fix an error in a unit test than in an integration test. But only an integration test can tell you whether the application works really as it was required. But you know the requirement. Okay, I had a mind change in the last years. I started to do more tests, and then suddenly the tests became more important. So I have to be careful how to write tests. And like too much coding is a problem, so too much tests can be a problem. The second point is a test should tell a story. Like you want to understand a program, you should be able to understand a test. What is a test really testing? And so whenever you add a new test, it should add a new aspect. And it should not repeat tests you already did. And like good variable names, good names for tests also help in understanding. What is the problem with unit test? It's dependencies. I tried to make unit tests many years ago, 5 or 10 years, but I didn't do it a lot because whenever I had dependencies, I had problems. Okay, there are techniques for this, interface with test classes, or you can inherit a mock class and have a mock instance to do the test. But the problem is, okay, one point is if you do this, you come to a different style. You have more method calls. One problem is, I cite here the ABAP programming guidelines, that SAP even tells the people, do not make too small methods, because our language is not optimized for many method calls. I made a measurement a few months ago. I found still 150 nanoseconds for a method call. So a method call is fast, but it is not fast enough to do just a simple addition of a number, as you can do in C, because in C normally the compiler optimizes the method call so efficiently that you do not feel the pain. In ABAP you can feel it in certain cases. So maybe this is one of the reasons that SAP thought, okay, we need another technique. We cannot just rely on this, on many methods. To be fair, I often do many methods. It depends a bit on what is the problem. And the second point with many methods is sometimes a program, at least in my impression, becomes more complex. So SAP added a new technique, and this is the test theme. And what I will do, I will make a short demonstration of a unit test, how to make a test-driven unit test, and then I will just make a short test theme statement. Okay. Where's my mouse? Yes, it's okay. What do I need? Clips. The unit tests I show here are synchronized to GitHub repository. before I change the coding, I make a check that the Z-unit demo repository is synchronized. And now I can go to Eclipse and start coding. Where is it here? Okay. Okay, make a new class. I work now mostly in Eclipse. It has advantages to SAP, and for me it is faster and more efficient to work there. Only test demo. What I show you here, you can do also in SAP. You can do it also for function group, and you can also do it for local classes of programs. Okay. Now I have an empty class. I use the split screen feature because I want to see the class coding and the test coding on the same screen. Now I make a trick. I put in the word test and make code completion. And now I have a simple test coding. The second point, I want to have the option to make tests for local class for private methods also. So I declare the test class as a local friend of the class that is under test. Definition, I have to say definition deferred, and then I have to define for the class local friends the test class. Okay, so that's this. Second point is I want a setup method. It runs before each test. I need normally only one test class. Only when I test static attributes or static, if I have static attributes class data, then the class constructor is run only once per test class, and in that case I need a lot of test classes because I always want to start with the clean class attributes. I make code completion, add implementation for setup, and put into the right order. Okay, that I do not need. I wanted to have a very simple method. I want to have a method that gives me the actual date. So I want to have the actual date returned. Okay. I need also the test class data I've got back to my class. I need an instance. And now I fill the variable with a method that does not exist in the moment. Okay. Now I want to generate the method. I go to string 1 and I don't see an option. But there is a trick to do this. I go here. And now I can create the method. Look here to the left. So now it's, yeah. And now he adds the coding and also the correct typing. Now I want to have a unit test. So I make again a trick. I put an A and code completion. and then I have the assert equal statement, proposed with a limited number of parameters. There are more, but normally this 3 are enough. I want to have a good name, return the actual day. This is the variable I test, and I expect today. 11, yeah. I activate. I have to be a bit careful. It takes a bit until it's activated. I do not do the unit test before. I go to the context menu. I can do one as ABAP unit test, or more beautiful, I do coverage, also coverage ABAP unit test. Okay, I have a failure because it doesn't. This is the idea to have always a filing test, because the idea is when you do unit tests, you rely on them and you try to make not too many tests. So normally every aspect is tested only once, and it can happen that you believe that the test is working, but it's not working. And so it's a good practice to always see that a test fails and then make a change that leads to a passing test. This is not theory. I really learned it myself. And it's really funny how strange the reasons can be. This is see, correct? Here's the datum. What did I do wrong? See datum. Pretty printer. Ah, 2017. Then coverage unit test. Okay, this test passed today, but not tomorrow. I could put the date, the datum also here, but I would not do this. There are advices not to have too complex unit tests. The logic should be in the coding, not in the test. And so the test should be simple, it should be specific, and there should not be an if statement there, and there should not be something that goes to an external logic. So I leave this as it is, but I have to do something with this, and I will do the new technique. I will use the test theme. I call it the datum, and put an end test theme. Underscore. Yes. Here the example is simple, but in practice you can have dozens of test themes, and there are situations where I would say it is even better to really work with mock instances. I do not do in the moment very often mock instances, but how to say, test theme statements can become quite a lot, and I start to forget that I really run all injections, and so I will use a pattern in the setup methods. I will make a test injection, and if this is 1, I want to have an error, because then I forgot to redefine this test theme. Again, I make here an assert, but I want to have the fail statement. In this case, this just report a fail. If this statement is 1, the unit test fails, and say redefine me, because I do not want to see this, and these parameters here don't exist. Okay. Again, I test the test because I want to see a failure. Redefine me. And now I add the injection. I can inject once, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. But when the unit test is run, it is always injected at the place where the pointer is. And so this is a statement I'm testing, so I have to inject before the statement, not after the statement. And then I am here in the context of the tested coding. I have no access to the variables of the unit test, but there's a trick I will show in the next slides, that you can add a class of type testing in local types when you want to communicate between variables of the unit test and the tested coding. But here it's a simple situation. I just tell the system 2017 11. Successful. Okay. Coverage as unit test. Okay, looks fine. You see, you don't have 100% test coverage if you have test themes, because this part of the coding is not tested. But if you have a mock instance, for instance, you know, everything is green, but the coding of the instance that makes the external call is also not tested. Okay, so the good thing with test themes is it is really not much more complicated than what I showed to you, and you can apply it into near to every case where you want to have a unit test. And this is really the difference to before SAP provided the statement. Before I often surrendered. Okay, go back to the slides. Tips. Okay, the good blogs by Klaus Ziegler and Horst Kahler. The pattern, how to prevent to forget test injections, I already showed to you. There can be surprises. A test passes where it should not pass. The trick is to implement test themes correct. For instance, I have a select statement from a database. Select single from into table where condition. And there are two options. The left one, you just fill this value. If you do this, you have a passing unit test. Oh no, if you do this injection, it really simulates what the select statement is doing. It checks for the where condition. If it's true, it returns the data and sets the subreturn code to 0. In another case, it clears the value and sets the subreturn code to 4. And I tell you, I advise you that you should normally use this pattern. Because if you do the other one, you will have surprises. And then you can download the slides. Sometimes it's interesting, it's helpful to have a test container, because then you can really communicate between the injected code and the unit test. And a second pattern is how to check whether a code part is executed. Also, this is an interesting pattern. I just put it to the slide so you have it for later reference. So in earlier times, in earlier releases, I often failed to write unit tests because I had too much problems with the dependencies. So, sorry, but I work on limited time, and Maybe I'm also not a good developer. And with ABAP 750 it changes. Because normally it's not so difficult to add an injection. Real world tasks can be complex, and I will not say that you can solve every test problem with test themes, but my feeling is it gives you more options where you can choose from. Okay, I use test themes when I find out, or when I think that they help me. I do it for old and for new coding. Okay, the test I showed to you also on the GitHub repository. Okay, but my idea was not testing. My main idea was how to say, not to work 15 hours in a project, or not to be asked to make a coding working, and then work hours over hours, weeks over weeks, and then finally go to the customer and tell him it didn't work. So when I go back to Michael C. Feathers, and there are a lot of advices in this famous book, there's one typical workflow that gives me a pattern if I'm in a difficult situation. And this is a typical workflow while changing legacy code. The main idea is I add a unit test to understand and to have a safety build. And here again comes the test themes, because this is the risky part. If you add a unit test to an application that is complex, that gives has crazy behavior, and maybe even critical, and no one knows what it's doing, then adding a unit test to this can be risky. And if you have to break dependencies by doing by really recoding the logic, you have to be very careful that you don't break it. And this is where the test themes really have the most important impact. Normally you cannot do many things wrong with a test theme if you be a bit careful and not erase too many lines of code. And then you can refactor to simplify the plan changes, because then you refactor under the safety belt of a test. Then you make a change to the unit test so that it passes only after you made the change. And then you change the code. And then typically I invested quite a lot of time to make the unit tests. And so, but I do less real-world testing. And my impression is it works. And the second point is, then I have a unit test for this piece of the coding. If I return later, I look into the unit test and it helps me to understand the coding. Or if I do later on changes, again, at least this tiny piece of the code is now under test. I have more control of this. Okay, but this is still not all. Okay, I have a technique. I can do add tests, but typically I'm still confused. Normally, when I write a program, I see a lot of text. It's like writing a book. But I'm a visual person. I personally have problems to remember all this text. So I have a desire. I ask myself, why are there so few things like circuit diagrams? If I go to electronics, for instance, I have diagrams like this. Why don't we have this in the computer science? So I did draw quite some diagrams in earlier times. But drawing these diagrams was hard work. I have to be concentrated. I have to be careful not to draw it in the wrong way. I have to really look to all the code pieces and to write it down. It took a lot of time, and so I didn't make so many diagrams. And so the question is, can there be an automatization? And I always wanted to have a tool for this, but I never had the chance to do this. And now the SAP community comes into play. I did go to the SAP Stammtisch in Munich, and there was a SAP Intertrack, Munich 2015, and Damir Meyer invited a famous specialist from the Smalltalk community, Tudor Gilbert, who gave a speech about how to read problems, how to solve real problems without reading code. Okay, this was a very animated talk, and I didn't understand a lot. And so I tried to do something, and what you see in the second half of my talk is what is the result of this. Okay, there are two tools that come out of this. One is SAP to Muse, SAP to Muse, because what Tudor Gilbert showed us was Muse Analysis. Muse Analysis is a platform to do code analysis, to analyze code that is written in different languages. And the second problem was I needed not an analyze from an architecture point, from a planning point. I work as a concrete developer, and so I have a very concrete method I have to change, I have to understand. So I needed a second tool. This is model to model. And okay, what did I have? I have then very big diagrams. This is not the first diagram I had. It is, but this is a real life application. It's real world custom application, and it's a very big diagram. It's one of the problems I had also in earlier times. If you make diagrams from code, you often have very, very big diagrams. And here you see a part of this, and you have also already some logic, some connected methods are red and attributes are blue, are highlighted. But without this technique, you would never find it out. And so I improved the logic, and I come to diagrams like this. Here I told the system I do not want to see all. I want to see certain methods are red and attributes are blue. This is a class method. This is a class here. And I want to see only part. And I arranged this, and I made comments to this. And this is like, how to say, like a plan of the kitchen or the plan of the water pipelines. I started to make plans of certain aspects of the coding. Not all coding, but like you do in electronics also, you have many circuits, and often you have special diagrams for the power supply, for the, for the Wi-Fi, for the blue, and so on. What is to be found? Why are classes or something that is a grouping? Because I do not work only with ABAP. I work with everything that's somehow coding, and even Excel is a coding. A guideline for a colleague can be a coding. I mark database tables as green. Normally, I don't see database tables in UML diagrams. Blue is not an attribute of a class only. For me, it is data, something that has data. Attributes store data. And red is not only a method of a class, it can be also a function, it can be the coding of a program, it can be the coding of a transformation. It is something that it's coding, that is logic in it. Then this blue lines is access to data. And the gray lines is invocations of methods. If a coding asks another coding something, and the error goes to the code that is called. Which code is used? So there are two open source tools. One is SAP to Muse. It extracts meta information to Muse. It does not extract source code. It's easy to install. It's just a single report. It's developed with many global classes, but when you go to a customer, you have just a simple file. It is developed using ABAP Git. It works on ABAP 702, and it's under MIT license. So it is very easy to use even for commercial projects, and you can even run your own company on this if you have a good idea. Just fork it and do whatever you want with it. I prefer my, open source sounds so funny, but sometimes I prefer to buy software than to do it in my spare time. Second is Muse to Model. This is now really a software exploration tool. SAP to Muse was an extraction program, but Muse to Model is an open source software exploration tool. And the idea is to be used by developers who really work with legacy code. Again, it displays everything that is provided by the extractor, because in this case it's tables, WebDinfo, ABAP, SAP, BW, and so on. There are funny functions like jumping into Eclipse with RDT or BVMT links. You can adapt it. It's open source. That is the advantage of it. And diagrams can be customized, elements can be commented, and this customization can be stored. And this is very important for me. I do not want to rearrange objects over and over again. I want to have it at a certain point, because this helps me in remembering where is something. And again, it's under MIT license, so it's very safe to use, and if you have a good idea, to build something on top of it. It's easy to install. You just go to sap2muse.org and read the wiki, the installation guide, download the coding and paste it into a new program, add the text to the text elements, and run it. Muse to Model is also easy to run. Again, you go to muse2model.org, then you forward it to GitHub. Again, go to the wiki, read the installation, and then you can here download an image and extract the zip file, and you go to the file.exe, and then you start a Smalltalk application. And this image is ready to work on Windows and should work on Apple or Unix with some additional work. This interesting thing, you really have a living image. It's like Apple, it's like Unix, it's like Windows, but the difference is you cannot. Now I say it's really okay. It's really funny. A program on Smalltalk is normally not started or not stopped. It is started at once in the image and then at once, and so you do not stop it. You just save the image or throw it away. There are some simple GUI functionality. Is this green one here? Again, the idea is not to have something beautiful, because an open source program is not. I do not have to sell it. No one gives me money, and so the main idea is not to have it beautiful. The main idea is to have it efficient to the person who is sought to use it. And in Smalltalk, it is so that you need the desktop, because that is the only way that you can speak with the system in certain things. So the windows normally always leave a bit desktop space. And so if I go to the uppermost line here, this normally remains always visible. And so I gave this tiny GUI this strange shape, and it's surprising, but it works wonderful on Smalltalk. And here, this is the XML file that is written by the Muse to Model application, where the position information or comments or so are stored. And again, to stop, you make a left mouse click on the desktop, Then we have the vault menu and choose save and quit, or you may just show the image away. Okay, now I will show how to do this. 20 minutes. I want to have the SAP extractor. I go to sub2muse.org. That forwards to the GitHub repository. Documentation is in the wiki. No, I want to have this. And what I'm doing, I just take the most actual coding here. You can click on this. And this you can really cut out with copy and paste. That is enough. Then I go to my SAP system. I just make a simple chat program. This is already existing. And just paste the coding in here. Then I have a second file with the text information. I go to the text elements and put it in here. And then it runs out of the box. I saved variants. For instance, this extracts the whole sub2muse application. Now you see it goes very fast, and then I download it to some file. Let me download it to my Barcelona folder. Okay, this is a Muse analyzers exchange format. You can use it with my tool, but you can also use this with the standard Muse analyzers. Then to have the diagrams, I go to muse.model, to model. Again, it's forwarding to GitHub. I see where the documentation is. It's in the wiki. Installation. And there's a video on how to do the next steps. And here I just load a complete image. It's a zip file. Okay, I will not do it in here because the network may be a bit too small for this. And if I do it, I get this. This is the pre-configured image for Windows, but there are files inside that you can also use for Apple and for Unix. I extract this. Okay. And here you have a coding faro.exe, and this is the image. This is the image, and this is the changing of the code. And I just run this. It's on my wrong screen. Okay. This is how to say. This is a simple pre-installed actual image of Muse to model. On the front you see the Muse panel. It's from Muse Analyzers, and two Muse models are already loaded into the image. One is a Smalltalk model, and the second one is an SAP model. Then you have here the playground. Then you have here some explanations, and you can set statement to this. Here, then it's explained that you, whatever you, for instance, if you want to run this, you mark everything you want to run, and then you do right mouse clicks, do it. I will do Control D for this. Or you can send statements to a class. What I will do now, I will store every information to a file, so I will have to set a path. The path is here in the moment wrong, and I have to have the path of my demo folder. So I send the system the path information. Here, look, the path is it's sticky. The path is empty in the moment. And now I send it. Now the system has the correct path, and the layout is also called demo. It is preset. And maybe it works immediately. Let me run the diagram. Yes. Because if I go to the user panel, I have to go to all classes. That is a bit the trick. Only for all classes you have the point visualize, and then I set it as current. This model I want to analyze. And again I say, draw me this diagram. And then I can remember this last used diagram to a file. If I do this, and go to my folder, I have an XML file. And this contains now the position informations and comments and other stuff. You can adapt this. Go to timer. So I go in here and says it's not beautiful. It's really crazy guy, and believes he should speak on a TechED and gives us such diagrams. Okay, I make it more beautiful. Okay, and I can say, and if I click on an element, I get an inspector, and I can send statements to this element. For instance, I can add a comment, new comment. Very important is the statement suppress others used by layers 1 using layers 1. This tells the system to show also the connected elements. And normally I start with the first element and shows this element and everything that's connected. And then I increase the diagram with the statement. Or with this statement, remove appearance changes from self, I make it smaller. The next is for highlighting, if I want to have connected elements colored. And this is to remove this. And this one, suppress with children, is to suppress a whole class. Sometimes, for instance, the locking class is connected to everything in the diagram, and it's confusing. And so, but often I do not want to see the locking, and so I can suppress the whole locking class. And this one is to go to RDT. Okay, I send a comment. I can say I want to have the next connected, Control D. Do it. I can close it, but it's still in the image. I remember this information to the file. Now the file is updated. And now I draw it again. This is sometimes bugs happen. It is easy to work around. I remember again, because it's only the screen that is a problem. And draw it again. Also, Faro is an open source program. There's a consortium behind, and they do a lot of work. But Windows, it's not so popular in many parts of the IT. So the Windows image, I have the feeling, has the biggest problem there. This is my new comment, and you see all the new elements. If I don't want to see all, I can also say, remove these appearance changes again. There's too many elements, I don't want them. Again, I have to save it to file. Now I have it like this. And how to say, this is the basic principle. When you remember, this is where it is something with coding. Here it's an ABAP method, below is an attribute. But it can also be a WebDinpo component, it can be a function, it can be a program, it can be a BW transformation, green can be a database table. My feeling is that there's so many coding, and then we have HANA and so on. I would say when we need a tool, we need a tool that can be adapted to use all kinds of logic that is in our environment. When I'm finished, all information is stored in the file already, but I want to save the image. I have to find some spare part here on the desktop. So I'm free. I make a left mouse click and go to save and quit, or I'd go to quit if I have the feeling that the image is not okay and I don't need it anymore, and can also leave it with here. Then you just quit it without saving. But normally I say it's everything fine and I save it. You see, I did not stop the image. It's also to say there is no startup or shutdown sequence for Smalltalk. Normally the Smalltalk images were once start up in the 17th, and now people invested a lot of time to make startup again in the 2017s. But normally Smalltalk is just an image, and you save the image, but you do not start the Smalltalk application in the classical way. Okay, then I go back to my presentation. 8 minutes. Okay, how do I make a diagram? I navigate to an attribute or method and send this show me or neighbor statement. Then I generate a diagram with an option I'll show you on a later slide. I want to color everything that's not connected to our neighbors. If I want to redo, I suppress this again. I have two further elements. You can remove the appearance changes, and I can suppress some classes if I need. And then I build a diagram. I had an idea also of automatic rearranging, but I had the feeling that it's not really needed. Okay, yeah, I did this and I had the feeling, okay, this is a good thing, and I'm using it. And if you look to my screen at my work, you see a lot of diagrams, and you see me working in the code and generating diagrams and doing it all day and doing thousands of this. But I have the feeling that it's not so easy to, it's good and everything. Everyone says that's a good thing. My feeling it's what is he doing? And so I added some slides, how to say, to get out of this frustration, because I have the feeling it helps me. This feeling that I got lost in the coding. I must say, it took me 1 year until the Smalltalk diagrams were really in a state that I can use it in the project. But since I was able to use them in the project, it's now for 1 year, I had the feeling that these situations where I get lost in the coding become rare. And if I get lost in the coding and become confused, it is mostly in situations where I have no extraction coding available. For instance, if I have a WebDinpo application to analyze, in the moment I cannot analyze WebDinpo, and so I get lost there. But in other cases, I have this diagrams that helps me. And so I added some slides with arguments. So someone says, okay, I do not need the diagrams, what else can I do? Yes, Subtimuse is also a multi-level well-used analysis. It goes over one level or two, as many levels as you want, and you can be surprised what it finds. The next point, I see too many elements. You can restrict it to diagrams, thanks to Server Notav to require this on SCN or even on class level. I need too much time to navigate to the coding. Linking to Eclipse, I hesitated a long time to do this. When I did this, I was really surprised, and it's the only way I'm navigating currently. It is so beautiful to do this. I have too many elements. I'm confused. Okay, to me, a picture is here the easier way to understand. Both is the same, but this is easier to work with. Interface methods are a problem, because if I make a well-used analysis, I found no uses of this method. Subtimuse marks the interface method to use the implementing. And in the second level, you find the method that uses the interface. The second point, some methods appear not to be used. Again, what's going on? Normally it's clear, but you have to be aware. You do a lot of things, and then suddenly you come to a method that's not used, and then you start to think, what is the reason? Okay, Subtimuse understands it quite easily. It's a redefined method. And a redefining method is used by the redefined method, and which is itself used by some other coding. This is a convenience feature you have in Subtimuse. Diagrams are not pretty. Okay, this is not for the management. The idea with straight lines is it's easy to know where they go to, and as it's a live diagram, it's easy to shift things around. Or to make a new diagram, like this one. It goes really fast after some training. I can everything do without, so why do I need it? The problem is not to do a single task. To do, if you have complex coding, you have a lot of things to do, and speed is just the point. If you have efficient tools, you can be successful. If you don't have, you have a problem. Before I made about a dozen diagrams, and now I would say I made thousands a year. I need to exchange diagrams with colleagues. Okay, it's an XML file. It can be synchronized with the version control system, and already in Subtimuse, Muse to Model, and also in the test, you find a models folder where these XML diagrams can be exchanged to colleagues. I'm confused by wrong names. Here, comments help me. I can add a comment to the diagram. I plan virtual renaming. I have other computer languages. It is planned to Muse Analyze is designed for many languages. Why not plant UML? Plant UML is great for UML, but UML looks on class level. If you have a real coding, you have to look to method level. Class is normally too big, and often the class structure is not good enough. Why no display of inheritances, static, public, private? Because it is not needing to analyze existing code. It is needed to plan an application. If you design a software, you need this, but for the dependencies, you don't need. A private method is just not called by someone else, or there's some local global friend, and then it's called from somewhere else, So if there's a dependency, it's a problem, but whether it was private or not, this method, it's not really important. The dependencies is what the problem is. How to understand which dependencies are shown? Again, you can download the slides. It's a trick that I use now as a workaround to understand better where do I see all dependencies, where do I don't see it. Again, where can I send statements to the user elements? You can read it later. Dynamically calls, again, the solution is commenting. I plan further logic, but it's still not done. And I made some late changes for the TechED. And to have it in mind what I all did, I have this for the issue 39. I have also a model that is available on the Mosita model GitHub repository. Thank you. It would not be possible without Damien Meyer, who found and invited to the Gilbar, Alexandre Bergel, who made the first coding, and the Warsal framework that is used for the diagrams, and many colleagues I forgot. Thank you very much. Questions? What you can see, a lot of work in open source is not coding. It's difficult to support an open source developer in the code because you have to have a good understanding. But a lot of work is documentation and issues and so on. So feel free to open an issue on GitHub. It is the most efficient way to communicate with me. And whenever you open an issue, other people can also find this issue. And it saves your and my time the best. And if you don't understand something, the reason is that it's bad documented. So please feel free to open also an issue for documentation, or maybe the wiki is open and you can change it yourself. Thank you.